you would have no internet. You'd be completely out of them. All right. So please try to spend a little bit of time, even if you just have a high-level view of how it works. It pays to know how this works. I'm going to use NSLOOKUP as my main troubleshooting tool. I know it's been deprecated for 10 years, but why is it still installed by default? All right. So Dig is cool and everything, and I use Dig a lot when I'm doing DNS tests. So I'm going to use NSLOOKUP here because it's easier. All right. And it provides kind of useful error messages that you don't have to have a deep understanding of DNS to figure out. So this is what a successful NSLOOKUP query would look like. If I tested and everything was fine, this is what it would look like. Something like this. I would type NSLOOKUP web1, and I would get this reply back. All right. And I bolded two lines that you want to look at. There's a server line there and a name line. It's very easy to confuse the two. I've been on many trouble calls where someone has run this command and confused the two IP addresses and reported back, gives me my DNS IP address back, right? It's easy to confuse the two. The bottom line is the one you want to pay attention to. So my actual IP address for web1 is 10.1.2.5. Right? So that's what it looks like when it goes right. So now let's talk about DNS gone bad. Bad DNS queries. One you will run into is server can't find host index domain, which is not as cryptic as it may look. It'll look something like this if you did this query and you got this error. All right. So the first thing this tells us is DNS server is working. The reason we know that is the first two lines are the server and the address, and the fact that it says server can't find, not server isn't there. I'm going to get into if the server was unavailable. But what you're seeing here is that the DNS server does seem to work, but for some reason it can't find web1. It's saying that it's not sure what web1 is. All right. There's a couple reasons that this could be. One, it could be a DNS search path issue. So what you should do is check there's a file called etcresolve.conf that has all of your DNS settings in it for a Linux machine. And that's true for all distributions, as far as I know. Looks something like this. A good version of that file for my network would look something like this, where it says, first line says search example.net. So the way the DNS search path works is if you just type web1, that's not what's known as the fully qualified domain name. That server is actually known as web1.example.net. All right. On some networks, it's very convenient to not have to type the full address every time you want to connect to something. For example, some of your networks, the mail server, you may just type mail or webmail or something in it if things pop up. For that to work, you have to have a DNS search path configured. What this is a list of domains that every time I search, for example, if I search for web1, it will take the search path one at a time and put web1 in front of each of these domains. So if I had example.net and example2.net here, it would try web1.example.net first. If it got a reply back, great. If it didn't, then it would try web1.example2.net and come and try that. And if that didn't come back, then it would complain. All right. So the problem could be here. So an example with this configuration is if I was trying to reach web1.example.net, that would work fine here because it's in my search path. But if I were searching for web1.dev.example.net, with this configuration, it would break and I would get this error. All right. The reason is, and the way to fix it is either type out the fully qualified domain name, so web1.dev.example.net, or if you're frequently going to use that domain, add it to your search path. All right. It's also It's also possible that even if you try the fully qualified domain name, so web1.dev.example.net may not resolve either. Okay, that could happen. If so, what's likely is you could likely have a problem with your DNS server. It's a big problem. Now, it's also another talk, and I'm not going to get into all the ways to configure Vine, let alone every other DNS server that exists. But I'll give you a couple pointers. All right. So if your DNS server is authoritative for the domain, so what that means is if this DNS server is the real DNS server that has physical text records or some other record on the machine for example.net hosts, you don't know what I'm talking about, then it's not going to do any good to troubleshoot your DNS server, right? So If it's authoritative for the domain, you need to check your configuration basically, check the zone, the example.net zone, and make sure web1 is in there, all right? Or you could have, in many cases, especially at your home, you probably, if you're not sure what I'm talking about, then you probably don't have a DNS server of your own that you configured yourself. So you're probably using someone else's recursive name server. So that means you send it a request, and it does the magic, gets the IP address back and returns it to you. If this is the DNS server you're using, if it's a recursive name server, and you get this error, it's possible that recursion has been disabled on that server. Maybe you know just enough about Vine to turn it on and use it as a caching name server. It could be that for some reason recursion is disabled and it's not allowing any requests to go out. Another test of the domains. Can this DNS server resolve anything else? If it can, then you know that's a data point. You know that this is the problem with this particular domain. If it can't, then there may be some problem overall with that machine. All right. Another bad DNS server query you will get is this. Nice, short, and sweet. Connection timed out, no servers can be reached. All right? I mean, this is straight to the point. What does that mean, though? Well, a couple things can cause an error like that. One, no name server. Your host itself could possibly not have any name servers configured for it. So, another cause would be you do have name servers listed, but for some reason you can't reach them. All right, which we'll get into how to test that in a minute. For the first one, let's say you want to test whether it's configured. Go to that same etcresolve conf file I talked about, and something that would work would look something like this. And I pulled the second line, name server 10113. If you see something like that, then you'll have a name server configured, so you can maybe test. Then you would skip ahead and test whether you can reach it, which I'm going to get into. If you don't have anything in there, no name server is configured, then add one. You're going to need one. So that's a likely cause. Also, normally speaking, if you're getting stuck over DHCP and nothing shows up there, then there's probably a problem with your DHCP server not passing out names. All right. If the name server is listed by its host name and not its IP address,